Module 30, Lesson 2, Southeast Asian Nations Gain Independence. We're going to try to analyze how former colonies in Southeast Asia worked to build new economies and governments in the second half of the 20th century. The first colony to achieve independence following World War II was the Philippines. The Philippines had been a colony of the United States since the 1890s. The United States is going to grant independence to the Philippines on July 4th, 1946. The Filipinos' immediate goal was to rebuild the economy and to restore the capital that had been devastated during World War II. The United States provided aid in exchange for free trade protections, but one of the more contentious issues was the fact that the United States maintained a military presence on the islands until 1992. The Philippines is an archipelago with many diverse ethnic groups, as you can see on this map here. Ferdinand Marcos was an important figure in Filipino history. He was elected president in 1965, but he's going to oppose an authoritarian regime that remains in power until 1986. The Filipino Constitution placed term limits on their president just like the American Constitution does, but Marcos got around that by imposing martial law from 1972 to 1981. During this time, he stole hundreds of millions of dollars from the Filipino treasury. He's going to lose an election in 1986, and he's going to eventually be forced into exile after initially refusing to give up power. He dies in the islands of Hawaii in 1995. As mentioned before, there were many different ethnic groups and religions practiced in the Philippines. So there's going to be a number of separatist groups that are going to attempt to break away and form their own country within the archipelago of the Philippines. One such group were Muslims who held a stronghold in the southern part of the country. A group of these, known as the Moros, began an armed struggle for independence in the 1970s. This conflict is going to last for over 2 decades. A ceasefire was finally signed in 1996, but a splinter group called Abu Sayyaf has continued the fighting until this day. This group is considered by the United States a terrorist group and has had links to Al-Qaeda and ISIL.
And now for something completely different.
Now we're going to move to mainland Asia, and we're going to talk about a former British colony, Burma. It remained a British colony until 1948. Today, if you were to try to find Burma on the map, you wouldn't be able to find it. It would be listed as Myanmar, and that's what it's been called since 1989. A repressive military government has ruled Myanmar for many decades. It starts with General Ne Win, who sets up a military government in 1962. He's going to remain in power until 1988, but the military to this day continues to rule the country. There's just not a single military dictator anymore. Burma is officially a Buddhist country and has many ancient temples located in its borders, and Buddhism remains an important force within Burmese culture. Another important figure is Aung San Suu Kyi. She's going to be an important figure who returns to Myanmar in 1988. She's the daughter of Aung San, who was a leader of the Burmese National Army. He helped fight to free Burma from Great Britain, and he's going to end up getting killed by political rivals. His daughter, Aung San Suu Kyi, is going to be placed under house arrest for many years for pro-democracy activities, and she won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1991 while still under house arrest. She's going to be freed in 1995, but arrested again in 2000. She is released in 2010 and has actually taken a role within the government of Myanmar, and her standing in the international community has been hurt dramatically due to her support of this oppressive military government that is still in charge here and has been engaged in ethnic cleansing of a number of groups. The countries of the Philippines and Myanmar have struggled a fair bit since colonization ended. One of the main success stories might be the country of Singapore. Britain tried unsuccessfully to unite the different people of Malaya into one state. These ethnic groups that were contained in this unified country really resisted. And so in 1965, Singapore is going to separate from the Federation of Malaya. The Federation has become known as Malaysia, whereas Singapore remains a independent, essentially city-state. It is on just an island by itself, in which it is become extremely prosperous. It was under the rule of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, who was in power from 1959 to 1990, that Singapore became an economic center of Southeast Asia and really within the global community itself.
Huzzah!
The last country we're going to talk about is the former Dutch colony of Indonesia. The Netherlands had been ruling Indonesia really since the late 18th century. Sukarno is going to lead a guerrilla army to resist the Dutch claims after World War II. After World War II, the Netherlands is only forced to agree to independence after losing the support of the United States and the United Nations in 1949. Sukarno attempted to act as sort of a George Washington-like figure in Indonesia, but his efforts to build a stable democratic nation were largely unsuccessful. Indonesia was suffering from a number of economic problems, and that really doomed the efforts from the beginning. Indonesia is an archipelago with many different ethnic groups, as you can see on this map. What you might not be aware of is that it is also an extremely populous country. It currently has the fourth most people in the entire world. Who's going to take over after that is a guy by the name of Suharto. He was a general and he puts down a rebellion in 1965. He's going to assume power after very bloody conflicts where between 500,000 and 1 million Indonesians were killed. Suharto is going to create a police state where bribery and corruption were commonplace, but the economy is going to improve during his rule, and so he's going to be able to hang on to power until the late 90s. But a general economic crisis strikes the Asian markets in 1997 and 1998, and without that strong economy propping up Suharto, he's going to be forced to step down in 1998. And the country has slowly made moves to democracy ever since. One region of conflict, though, has been the island of East Timor. Suharto expanded Indonesian claims into East Timor in 1976. Indonesia is going to rule this area extremely brutally. Jose Ramos Horta won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1996 for his efforts to help East Timor win its independence. The UN is going to sponsor a referendum in 1999 where East Timor voted overwhelmingly for independence, but pan-Indonesian forces went on a bloody rampage, killing hundreds. UN intervention eventually brought peace, and East Timor gained its independence officially in 2002. Yes,